Hello, everybody, and welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic. How is everyone doing this evening? Happy and blessed Monday, and welcome to episode 589 of the Welcome to Asgard podcast, where tonight we are going to be talking about this past weekend's box office because Avatar: Fire and Ash, Avatar 3, has finally been released, and the numbers are not too surprising considering what the early tracking was. However, for those that are trying to spin this box office opening for Avatar as being anything other than a lot less than they were likely hoping for, is not being completely honest with you. I mentioned this in my box office breakdown yesterday and also part of my article on geeksgamers.com, that when you compare the global openings between Avatar 3 and Avatar 2, you had a 20% decrease. A 20% decrease between the second and third movies, which means the early signs are Avatar is continuing to bleed its audience. And though it'll be fine this time around, people sometimes kind of gloss over the fact that I point this out. This film is going to get to $1 billion, likely to get to 1.5 minimum, and has a shot, though not a very strong one, at least at this point, of even $2 billion, but more likely than not ending around 1.8, if I had to guess, between 1.5 and 1.8, based off of the current tracking. And this is with the insinuation that the box office for Avatar, historically, whether it be the first or second film, likely now also the third, has very strong legs and does very well down the stretch. So that's insinuating, assuming a 4 to 5 times a multiplier, well above and beyond the average of what most films do compared to their opening weekend or from their opening weekend's global box office openings. Even insinuating and including all of those things still only gets the film to around $1.5 to $1.8 billion. And again, on paper, that sounds pretty good. Why would you say that 1.5 to 1.8 billion isn't all that good? Well, I would say it in comparison to what came before. I would say it's not as good when just a few years ago, Way of Water got to $2.3 billion. When several years before that, it got up to, the first Avatar film got up to $2.9 billion. And because that film was in 2009, the value of that is even more. The number of tickets sold for that movie grossly outweighs not only Avatar: Way of Water, but most especially the most recent film in Fire and Ash. So what this means is that more and more people are not having interest or losing interest in Avatar. At least this is what the perception seems to be. You don't lose 20% of your audience in your opening weekend, and likely a similar percentage down the stretch as well. Of course, we'll continue to follow that. That week 1 to week 2 drop-off is always the most important. We talk about that here a lot on the channel. But also, it follows the trend that we've seen since 2009. When the first film came out, it was a global phenomenon. Everyone thought, oh man, the second film is going to blow everyone's socks off and match that same level of success. And it didn't. It did well. Again, $2.3 billion is nothing to snuff at, but remember, the budgets on these films are not cheap. And so even with a $2.3 billion box office, you're not talking about the biggest return on investment. I think as of right now, we could all say the first film is still the most profitable of the franchise. And as each film gets released, they're becoming less and less profitable. And if the trend continues, by the time you get to Avatar 5, we're talking about a case where the film is not only not reaching $1.5 billion, but also is losing money. If the trend continues. Again, that's a pretty big if. We're still far ways away from that. I think Avatar 5 isn't scheduled to be released until, 2031 or something to that effect. So quite a long time until the perceived end of the entire franchise. But it is, I think, reason and caution for some of the executives and some of the people behind these films to start to open up their eyes and realize that, yes, they sell a lot of tickets, but they're selling a lot less every single time. Every subsequent release, they're getting less and less and less people interested. And it makes sense because you can only tell the same exact story so many times, even if you have the cool visuals, and even if you have all the CGI fest stuff that some people like to eat up and shove popcorn down their face just to sit back and consume, as it were. That only works for so long. And eventually you have to offer people a little bit more. But we'll talk about that. We'll see what y'all have to say on that one. And also, as was announced a couple weeks ago, it's actually been live for a while now, but I never did like in a formal show / announcement on stream, let alone in the title of any of my streams, that the Raven Awards, that's right, the Raven Awards, my award show where we talk about the best and worst films of the year for films released in 2025. The nomination forms are now officially open, so we are taking your formal nominations. There was a shortlist, a running shortlist that was being collected throughout all of last year, so thank you to everyone who participated in that, in getting names out there. You'll see that on the ballot, and again, I posted that link in the chat. I will post that link again, just in case anyone is just getting here. So again, on that link, you can then go fill out your form. Now, it's going to ask you for a password. The password is 1566. The reason why there's a password protecting the form is to try to avoid and to try to do away with the trolls. The trolls have been the bane of my existence, have really made things a bit more difficult in more recent years. So because of that, I've decided to go with FormBricks. FormBricks allows for password protection on their forms, and so far I've had pretty good success with it. With us getting our nominations in with very little problems as of this stream. Of course, I'm sure there's people who might be able to find their way around it, but at the very least, it makes things a little bit more difficult for them. And so, yes, indeed, the Raven Award nomination forms. So these are just for nominations. These are not to vote for your winner. All right, these are just the ones and the films and the people that you think deserve recognition, deserve the support as such. And that also reminds me that I need to go in and make sure that it's working, because for some reason, whenever I post links using my chat bot thing, it doesn't always go through into the other channels, and so just want to make sure that it was absolutely able to happen. All of this to say, of course, we are also in Christmas week, so just a few days away from Christmas, and so a lot of business around the house. Because of that, I will have to shorten the stream a little bit. So ending the stream around 8:30 Eastern time, maybe a little bit after. So we'll go about an hour, maybe a little over an hour, depending on other things, how the chat's going and everything like that. But just to kind of put that out there, because we still got a lot of stuff to do here around the house. And smash that like button, light up that, or rather smash the rumble button as well. Let's get into the chat and talk about all of these things as they are going on. So first we had Snortapoopus Cuber. Snortapoopus here once again early. Hello, woman that other quitteth, and then said hello to me. Hello to you. Jeremy Zakowski, what's going on? Good sir. Evening, Odin, and everyone on here. Good evening to you. Mr. Banjo Sandwich saying, one view and done with Avatar. Got better things to do than watch this ever again. Yes, and I would say that for all of them. And I would say that they're not even worth watching one time. Because they serve no purpose, and it's 3 hours of your life that could be spent doing much better things, like playing Arc Raiders, for instance, which is still so much fun. a bit obsessed with that game right now. I luckily run into a lot more awesome, cool people than jerks. I have been knocked out, though, by a few jerks who are just in there to ruin everyone else's fun. But overall, it's been fun, especially like the Matriarch game mode. Whenever the Matriarch's going on Spaceport, it's always fun to like bond with the different people on there. See who actually came prepared, who has like the defibs just in case someone gets knocked out and everything like that. And actually, there was a one point where I actually ended up not making it in time. Actually, there was one gameplay I had yesterday where we waited to the last minute. We were trying to get through. We weren't able to defeat the Matriarch, but we tried getting into the map. That the time was almost out. So I was luckily able to ask for for people who've never played the game, there's like escape hatches essentially that you can get to. There's some that are like public. There's some that are private if you have a key. And so one of the public ones was one of the air shafts. And I was able to put the call in with 30 seconds on the clock left. And it was me and one other person who were waiting, and we were like, so what's going to happen now? And sure enough, luckily, we got out of there with like 5 seconds remaining. Apparently, I got an achievement because of that, like just barely made it out alive. But it's been fun. But yeah, much better time playing something like Arc Raiders or other things than watching any of the Avatar nonsense. Thanatos Felicitas saying, hello, Odin, hello to you, Thanatos. Welcome back. Always great to have you here. We got Keely Chow hanging out. What is going on? Snore Poopas with an early Merry Christmas, one and all. Yes, indeed. A blessed Advent, everybody. We are still in the midst of the Advent season. We are also on the days of the great antiphons, so the O antiphons, which are very rich in tradition. So we are a feria of Advent of the second class today. That is what's going on. And of course, we have the Vigil of the Nativity of our Lord, Christmas Eve, as it is often known, on Wednesday, and then Christmas Day, the Nativity of our Lord, first class feast, holy day, on Thursday. So we're excited. Kids are excited. Family's excited. Family's coming in tomorrow. It's part of why we're ending the stream a little bit early tonight, so that way we can try and get stuff like that taken care of. By the way, I did see this come in. So Gandalf, 1477, Kimberly G, Killian Shadowcat, always here, always so supportive. Thank you very much, and just dropped a $10 super chat saying a Merry Christmas, ode Merry Christmas to you, an early Merry Christmas to everybody. Appreciate it, and thank you for always being here. Always appreciate your support. All right, Banjo Sandwich saying, Merry OMB Miss, everyone. There we are. Keely Chow. Hail Odin. How are you? Thor, Freya, Baby Sif doing? How was your weekend? What did you have for dinner on Friday night? The usual. Had my Domino's cheese pizza, and everyone's doing okay. Everyone's doing okay. Kids are a little bit out of it because they're used to going through like daycare and school, and they have the whole week off, and so it's like an extended weekend, as it were. So, yeah. Prince Screen, what is going on? Hail Odin chat, hail to you. We got Lady Tharp of Hastings. Lady Tharp, welcome back. Glad to have you in the chat. Always great to see you in the chat. The Morak, what's going on? Saying, hail Odin, I got my YouTube year-end summary. Your channel was my number 3 most watched. Nice! Yeah, when I looked at my summary, and I honestly didn't really believe what it said, because it had Film Threat as my number 1 channel. And look, I've listened to a lot of Film Threat, but I definitely know that I listen to a lot of other channels a lot more often. So I don't know if it's because I've listened to a lot of their like morning shows. Usually it's like the Friday shows when they're doing all their reviews and such. But I don't remember them being the one I listened to the most. But yeah, the Film Threat was my number 1. Then I think Return to Tradition. Shout out to Anthony Stein. Return to Tradition was my number 2, I think. And I don't remember what my other ones on there were. Luke Zilla, hail to you. What's going on? Welcome back. 589 Bingo, says the Banjo Sandwich. Again, I'll say Merry Christmas to everyone in the chat. Yes, indeed. We got Mr. Roy, who is a member here, saying hello. Hello to you, Mr. Roy. Thank you for being here. XVoot85 coming in once again. XVoot, my most consistent super chatter support. Appreciate it, man, always. Saying, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Happy New Year. I am hoping that you will do a box office profit ranking by studio for this year. Thank you. Well, thank you very much for that super chat, for the $5 super chat. Yes, plan to do that, but probably won't be until the new year because we're still having box office coming in, right? It's one of those things where, just like I mentioned this before, whenever people do their end of year top 5, top 10 movies of the year, it's like, unless you had the time to watch every film that came out that you had interest in, it's impossible to do that list without having to like change it. So I'm going to wait for some more money to come in because Avatar is going to make some difference for Disney, not as much as you would think. And it's because of how much money they spent. I mean, this is a movie that needs to make $1.2 roughly billion just to break even. And seeing that it's tracking towards like a 1.5 to 1.8 billion, it's still talking like north of $100 million in net profit just from the theatrical. That's not including your VOD, your Blu-ray 4K sales. And there's some hardcore fans of this franchise. And I'm sure that there might even be some merchandising stuff. It's always hard to quantify that. But, you know, it's going to make some money for Disney. But interestingly enough, it's not going to make nearly enough to make up for the massive losses that they've had this year. It's always funny because we'll look at one article today from Deadline, good old Tony at Deadline, who in his headline talks about how, Avatar is pushing Disney towards like a $6 billion global box office year. And it's like, did you talk about how much money they spent on all those movies that made $6 billion? Because guess what? They didn't get 100% of that $6 billion. They spent a lot more than that $6 billion, and they're still roughly about $1 billion in the hole. It might be closer to $700 million now because of Zootopia 2. That film is very profitable for them and is going to continue to be profitable for them. So that's going to make a much bigger difference. What Zootopia 2 is able to do is going to make a much bigger difference than what Avatar does. Because Avatar is not going to make them as much raw profit as one might think. All right, we got Caveat Ties saying, hey, Caveat Ties. What's going on? We got Banjo Sandwich saying the math don't lie. No, it don't. No, it does not. We got Print Screen hanging out. What's going on, Print Screen? Saying the opening weekend of Avatar now means that Minecraft had the highest domestic opening weekend in 2025. Chicken Jockey. Yes, indeed. It also had one of the largest opening weekends globally as well. And I guess with that being said, let's just jump right into our talk about box office and our talk about some numbers here, because there's some important facts and data points about this opening for Avatar that might be overlooked by many. And it has to be, again, recognized. There's a lot of factors going on with Avatar. It's kind of its own animal in many respects. But since we're about to talk about numbers in a much more formal fashion, it's only appropriate that we get things started off on the right foot.
Time to see a real math magician at work.
That's right, everybody. It's time to see some math and to see a real math magician at work. And so we've gotten some updates to the weekend box office for Avatar, Fire, and Ash. As you can see, Avatar, Fire, and Ash had a global opening of around $346 million, which really, honestly, is much smaller than I think a lot of us were expecting. This is a movie that came in with a very small domestic opening weekend. We're talking less than $100 million for its domestic opening. So that's very, very bad. This is also a good 200 million or so less than what Zootopia 2 was able to do. Now, full caveat and full disclosure, that's entirely because of China. China, remember, had like a 270 plus or so $million opening weekend for Zootopia 2. Again, insane numbers that I don't quite fully buy or think as completely legitimate. And that's just because that's any numbers from China, but especially very large numbers, just like from earlier in the year with Ninja 2. It's like, yeah, basically when I'm talking about my box office hits of the year, when I make all those different lists, I'm probably not going to include films like that one because, again, the only data that we have is coming out of communist China, and that really isn't something that we can fully rely on. But even that being the case, assuming all things are equal, we're seeing, of course, massive discrepancies between Avatar and Zootopia 2. Now, 345, now obviously, again, it was adjusted up a little bit with the actuals from the weekend, so 346, so really not all that much different there. It's a lot less than that 560 by Zootopia 2. If we keep going down the list, we see that it's just above what Jurassic World Rebirth was able to do. Jurassic World Rebirth, of course, was able to leg it out quite a bit. It's also a bit more than Lilo and Stitch, the live action, which had a $304 million global opening weekend. It also is better than the Minecraft movie, but as someone just mentioned, the Minecraft movie did have a much better domestic opening, and of course, Minecraft went on to make quite a bit of money, did not cost nearly as much as a film like Avatar did. And those are really the biggest opening weekends, globally speaking, of this past year. And so that's why many are saying, oh, it's the second biggest opening of 2025. That's amazing. Well, it would be amazing if this was not connected to any other films, and if this was taken just in pure isolation in 2025. But we can't do that. We have to remember that there were other films that have released before this year, and that even one was an Avatar film from back in 2022, and then that film had over $400 million, well over $400 million in its global opening. That made a difference, by the way. The second film, Way of Water, against the third film, Fire and Ash, we saw a 20% decrease. So that means that Avatar Fire and Ash made 20% less in its opening than did The Way of Water. Now, I did look into it further, and I said, okay, well, maybe there was some delays in openings that could have accounted for that, right? Maybe it could be that Fire and Ash hasn't opened in every single market yet, or they're not all reporting. That's not the case. Just like Fire and Ash, just like Way of Water, really with most global hits or global massive hits like this, they all released at the same time. They all had a similar release schedule. So that isn't it. There are some who are trying to say, well, this one opened up closer to Christmas time, and so people are shopping, and so that's going to impact it. There really is no reason for us, though, to insinuate or to assume that that led to a 20% decrease in total box office sales, let alone the types of decreases that we saw domestically, which, again, is quite a large discrepancy between them, right? The last movie, what made 130-ish plus million in its opening domestically, talking there about Way of Water. So a massive decrease domestically between those two movies. So all that is to say that when we look at the data despite what Tony at Deadline is going to try to run with. Obviously, we have one of the king shills of box office media saying Avatar Fire and Ash now at 89 million opening. Oh, man. It was reported at 88. Now it's at 89. Huge increase there, Tony. Thrust Disney, goodness me, towards $6 billion worldwide. Again, that number would make you think that Disney had a pretty successful year. Au contraire, they didn't get 100% of that. They also spent a lot more than that on all those properties that made the amount of money that they did. And so guess what? You end up with some box office losses there, okay? Still David is still at $22 million from Angel Studios, which is a record for them. Housemaid tidy at $19 million. Monday box office says the weekend opening for James Cameron is slightly higher, both domestic and worldwide, respectively, with $89 million and $347 million. Again, we're talking minimal. Like you say slightly, I would say negligible, not even worthy really of mentioning. Sunday came in better stateside with an estimated $24.5 million than the $23 million Disney had called it at yesterday, holding at 13% from Saturday. That's better, and here's where the shilling begins. That's better than the 18% Saturday to Sunday ease on Avatar Way of Water international races to 258. This also basically destroys anyone, people even like Tony, who are going to try to make the argument about, we're close to Christmas time, and so therefore that's why the box office isn't as strong. Because if that were the case, then why are we seeing a better Saturday to Sunday hold between these two movies? Like, why would that be the case if this was not actually what was going on? Instead, what we can say is, no, this film is just not selling nearly as well as the last film did. Again, a 20% global decrease between the two movies. And then it gives some updates on other films after that. All that is to say, what's going on with Avatar? Okay, remember when it comes to the Avatar film, let's go ahead and pull up for ourselves the numbers.com. And let's go ahead and also look at what these films tend to do. All right, so $347 million was currently being reported. Let's go ahead and pull up the Avatar franchise on the numbers.com just to get a little bit of a perspective here. Okay, so these are the unadjusted numbers. Okay, so the first film, Avatar 2009, made $77 million in its opening. In today's dollars, that's like well over $115, $120 million or so. All right. The second film, $134 million, the best on paper at the very least, opening. But then look at that, dropped all the way to $89 million. That's a massive drop. Percentage-wise especially, that's insane. That's over $40 million less. So if that trend continues, if the global 20% difference, 20% less difference between these two films continues on, that would mean Fire and Ash caps out somewhere around $1.8 billion and potentially less. The reason why it can still get that high, because some might be saying, well, wait a minute, don't you always say you take your global, multiply it by 3, and then that gets you your typical, end final point? Yes, but that's the average. Most films on average make 3 times their global box office after their opening weekend. So if a film opens to 100 million globally, there's a more likely than not chance the average run of films that make 100 million is around 300 million by the end of their run. If that were to hold true for Avatar as well, like any other film, then that would actually put the end point for this movie at only $1 billion. But there's a factor that a lot of people that are a bit harsher on this movie than even I would be, they might be overlooking. And that is the hold factor. All right. So let's especially go with Way of Water since that is the closest and has the less need for inflation. And again, a very important factor nonetheless. Okay. All right. For the domestic box office, look at the legs here. All right. As I said, on average, we usually see about 3 times the box office. The legs on the film was 5.14. All right. So it made 5 times what it made in its opening weekend by the end of its run domestically. You then look at what the production budget was, right? Typical break-even point these days around $3 million is around 3 times the budget. So if you make 3 times your budget, you pretty much have broken even. And that, of course, is unless you make a vast majority of your money in China, in which case your break-even might go a little bit higher. Or if you make a vast majority of your money domestically, you might actually have a little bit of a smaller break-even point. But as you can see, it even made 5.8 times its production budget. So again, very, very strong numbers for the typical Avatar release. We'll go ahead and actually, just for the sake of things, pull up the original Avatar film as well to see if it has the same data that we can look to. All right, this also gives us a little bit of perspective here, okay? The first movie, again, inflation doesn't really matter here because we're talking about opening weekend reporting versus the final run reporting. Domestic legs for the first Avatar film was 10 times. We're already seeing, okay, and this is something that I've actually overlooked in the past. Look at that difference in total success, right? In the rate of people going between 1 and 2. This is how we know less people by a large degree. I would argue about half of the audience has essentially evaporated between even the first and second movie in a certain light, all right? Because if the first film had 10 times its opening weekend domestically and then made 12.3 times the production budget, that's a lot smaller production budget, so that also could explain why it's that. But even that domestic number, right, 10.1 times its domestic. Way of Water dropped to 5 times. So it had half of the run. Now, if that trend continues, that would mean that we would see a 2.5 run for this movie, but let's just be honest here, that's not going to happen. It's not going to be halved for that. This is the kind of movie, 3 hours in runtime. People who enjoy these films are ones that are willing to sit through 3 hours and also are willing to wait for a film, whether it be the seats or whether it be for the crowds to die down. These are people that can see a film down the line, right, down the stretch. But that's still a massive difference nonetheless, right? Domestically is where Avatar is honestly dying. It is honestly dying. Again, you cannot look at these numbers and not think anything else, right? You go from 10 times your opening in 2009 to 5 times your opening in 2022. Even if you're able to hit something close to this, based on the fact that it's still 20% globally behind this movie, that Fire and Ash is already 20% trending behind the global start for Avatar Way of Water, and also a quite sizable portion of that is the domestic, where this film opened to $134 million. This most recent film only opened to $89 million. We could suspect that the drop, or rather the legs for Fire and Ash, though they'll be stronger than average, probably won't reach the same heights as Way of Water, or especially nowhere anywhere close to the first film. So do we see a 4x? Do we see a 4.5x times its opening domestically? Now, again, these are talking about domestically, not internationally. Internationally, however, it is still worth noting, right, that in typical fashion, we typically see about a 5 times box office, at least for the last film, for Way of Water, from its opening of around $400 million, plus globally. It was able to, again, about 5x that by the end of its run. But we're seeing the trends going down. We're seeing the numbers going down. And so that's why 20% less than 2.3 billion ain't 2 billion. Closer to 1.8 billion, in fact. That domestic number, 688, probably getting it closer to 500 or less here domestically, which again, for 2025 might sound pretty good. Might even be in the top 5, top 10 domestically, but doesn't matter when it comes to your trends. Doesn't matter when it comes to your loss of audience. And when you're planning on making more of these films, if the audience is consistently dropping off to this large extent, by the time you get to 5, this is again just extrapolating the data that we have in front of us right now and saying what will happen in the future. Fire and Ash will be okay because it's probably still going to leg out, right? These films are leggy, okay? The first film, 10 times its opening domestically, 5 times its opening for the second film. Even if we don't see that level of a drop-off, since these are films a little bit closer together, could be a part of the equation there, we're still talking about probably a 4 times, a 4x, or slightly better, 4 to 5 times the opening weekend globally, at the very least. And that still ultimately would mean far less. And this is going to be, I think, the most interesting thing, because when we get to that end point, when the final box office has been reported for Fire and Ash, we will have concrete data of what I think is going to happen, which is, yes, we're going to see this film leg out. Fire and Ash is going to hold much better. Again, if it had an average run at this point, based on its opening, $1 billion is the best it could do. But it's not a typical film. It's not a typical franchise. It's a very leggy franchise, okay? Probably going to stick at me saying that. And so that's why we, because of that, say, yeah, the average might be $1 billion, but because of what this franchise is, it's probably closer to 1.5 to 1.8 billion. That's just being respectful of what has come before and of the trends beforehand. But even with that being the case, a lot less people are going to see these films every single time, and I can't say I'm not surprised because the films aren't all that good. Sure, they're flashy, they're CGI fest, and some people like that. That's a far cry from where it needs to be, and especially in like 5 to 10 years when the franchise is finally ending, where will the audience be then? Because if the drops remain consistent, if we have 2 sets of data, right? If we have a 1 to 2 and then a 2 to 3 level drop that are similar, or at the very least somewhat rhyming even, it spells catastrophe for the final, for the finale of the franchise. We'll have to wait and see. Still too early to tell, but really not very good, start comparatively to the previous films. Again, it's on its way to $1 billion. It's on its way to breaking even. It's on its way to making some profit. And it's on its way to making well over $1.5 billion. But for an Avatar film, that ain't cutting it. Anyway, what say y'all? Forever Sci-Fi is a member hanging out. What's going on, Forever Sci-Fi? Thank you for being here. We got Banjo Sandwich saying, by Avatar 5, they'll be paying us to watch it. That definitely seems to be the trend. Or at the very least, they'll be submitting it for a loss. For sure. All right, I did see that a super chat came in. A massive super chat. Whoo, boy. XVoot85. XVoot. Thank you very much, man, for a $50 super chat. Dude. Wow. XVoot85 coming in hot. Thank you very much, man. He says, Merry Christmas to you and your family. To yours as well. Hopefully YouTube leaves enough of this to buy a toy for your little one. What are your thoughts on the new Spielberg movie next year? I'm excited. Thanks again for the content this year. Much appreciated. Well, again, I appreciate you, man. Thank you so much for the support. Really do appreciate your support throughout all of the streams, and especially for your financial support. Because, again, I appreciate everyone just for watching, checking things out. But y'all are the ones that allow me to continue to do my giveaways channel, and to make sure that I'm able to keep things, up to snuff when it comes to the channel, content and quality and everything like that. So it really does mean a lot, man. And yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that. Yeah, because YouTube's going to take their 30% cut. But absolutely, man, I will absolutely do that. So thank you so much. And I know that he will appreciate it. To the question of Spielberg's next movie, honestly, I'm not excited much for anything that Spielberg has to do anymore, because he really just has lost it. He's lost his touch, and he has had a couple of films that have overall been good. He definitely is still as prolific. He still has the talent. He still has the quality. It's just that I don't think is as good at picking projects as he used to be. He used to be pretty consistent, right? Where the vast majority of the films that he would have out there were good in some fashion. Over the past, really 20 years, right? Again, a career that spans since the 1970s, right? When your first film, is Jaws, right? That says, or at least your first major film is Jaws. But even before then, right? Duel was very well received. I haven't seen The Sugarland Express. But you had Jaws, you had Close Encounters in 1941. He just had banger after banger after banger for so long. Even in the early 2000s, he was still killing it with Minority Report and Catch Me If You Can, The Terminal, all great films. And then 2008, that's when I think things really took a downward spiral, okay? Because that was first when Crystal Skull, right? Indiana Jones, Crystal Skull came out. That was a trash heap. He did The Adventures of Tintin. I know some people defend it and like it. I hated it. I thought the motion capture and the visual effects were not quite where they needed to be. So everything just looked very off-putting. And it just didn't. It's a film I've never wanted to rewatch ever. Even the people that enjoyed it, I would ask, is this a film that you go back to every year? I doubt there are people, at least a lot of people out there, that would honestly say that it's a film they keep going back to over and over again. War Horse, I thought was pretty good. Lincoln was pretty good. Bridge of Spies, pretty good. BFG was fine. The Post was very self-serving. Ready Player One was terrible, especially when you compare it to the book. And then basically since 2018, we've gotten stinker after stinker after stinker, right? We had Ready Player One, which sucked. West Side Story, which was terrible. The Fabelmans, I've heard good things about it. I haven't seen it to say so myself, but it is what it is. And then he apparently has a film called Disclosure Day coming out next year, a science fiction film. And it's a story by Spielberg himself. It's got a good cast: Emily Blunt, Josh O'Connor, Colin Firth, Eve Hewson, Coleman Domingo, who I think is pretty great. Wyatt Russell is also set to act in the film as well. The screenplay is by David Koepp, who is a pretty well-known entity out there for the films that he has written. He's been writing since basically the 80s. So he's done Toy Soldiers, Death Becomes Her, Jurassic Park, probably one that most people know him for. The first Mission Impossible film. He was a writer on that. Let's see. It's all about what you've done for me recently, though. He also was a part of the writing team for the 2017 Mummy film, which was terrible. Indiana Jones Dial of Destiny, he was writer on that. Presence was the Soderbergh film. I heard some good things about that. Black Bag, can't say I said much about that. Jurassic World Rebirth. So really hasn't done a whole lot recently. So all in all, I would say the team he has together, it might be okay. He's got a great cast. It says here that in April 2024, it was reported that Spielberg's next project would be a UFO film based on his own original idea. And let's see. American science fiction film. Nothing about the story other than that. So, again, maybe he's trying to go back to the well here, saying, well, maybe I'm going to be able to recapture Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Like, maybe that's what he's going to try to do. I don't know. But I wouldn't say I'm excited for it, to be honest, though. He's had too many stinkers the last 20 years. His ratio of good to bad films has just not been very good. And, yeah. So, hopefully you're excited for it, though. And obviously, it'll probably still be on like the homework list for FNT, and I'll probably still watch it, but it's not like on my want to watch list. I have not sat down to look through the films of next year to make my top 5 most anticipated or anything like that. But that will be starting beginning of next year. That'll probably be the first, before I do a top 10 or top 5 best movies, worst movies of the year list, because I like to see everything I can, especially like the best of list. That's going to be probably the one that takes the longest, because there's so many films that I want to see that I was not able to. Whereas the worst films of the year list, typically I don't go out of my way to see bad movies, so that's usually easy to come about. And most anticipated films of 2026 will be easier as well, because that's just me. Hey, let me go down the list of releases and then see which ones I have any interest in. But anyway, dude, thank you again, XVoot, for that very generous super chat. I very much appreciate it. All right, Guy, 67.99. What's going on, Guy? Saying here, hey, Odin, I think the reason why Fire and Ash box office are lower is people will be waiting for IMAX and Dolby. No. Again, this is a line that you're going to hear from a lot of box office shills. People who love James Cameron, even people who are Avatar fanboys, fangirls, whatever you want to say. People want to shill will give that excuse. Okay? But the fact remains, because remember, in this discussion, people oftentimes are not listening when I talk about these things, okay? I've already said that this film is easily going to get to $1 billion. That this film is going to make probably between 1.5 to 1.8 billion by the end of its run. That this film is going to have very good legs, because that is the historical standard for Avatar films. However, even if you have a similar 5x run, you're still 5xing from a much smaller number. This is the thing that people don't understand, it seems. If you 5x, which is what The Way of Water did, but you do that from 130 million, that's a lot more than 5xing from 89 million. Quite a bit of a difference, you could say, right? So, yes, the film's going to lag. It's based on the data that we have in front of us, there's no reason for us to doubt that the film is going to be able to lag out, probably around 4 to 5 times. But it's still doing that from a much smaller number. Again, globally, 20% less. 20% less. So that's a massive, massive difference. Okay? And that's why we're just going to see a much smaller box office, and that still says and means the same thing I said before. It's a lot less return on investment. It is a lot less profit, and also it spells a lot of bad it's a harbinger of things to come. If we have now seen 2 films in a row with massive drops, 2 films in a row with massive losses of audiences, and you're still spending the same amount of money, eventually, something's got to give. All right. Apparently, my son is needing me for a second, so I don't know if I have any music to my Be Right Back yet, because I haven't used it in a long time, but I will be right back, everybody. Typically don't do this, but when my son needs me, apparently one of his night lights is out, and I'll be back in a second. All right, everybody, we are back. Sorry about that. Had to change some batteries. He's just a little guy. I usually have my little baby cam, so I've got my little one who's 2, and then my son, little Thor, who's 5 already, which is insane to think about. And so I've been seeing him like get up, run out of his room, turn his lights on, and I've heard a little bit of the conversation between my wife and him, and so. I finally got a message from my wife about how one of his lights was out. So thank y'all for putting up with that. But yeah, going back to Guy's comment. Okay. Going back to Guy's comments, hopefully, it's now come through. Again, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you think in this specific instance, because the fact is it's a lot less. It's a lot less than the previous Avatar films. They legged out. This is absolutely true. But 2 legged out at a much, much smaller rate than 1 did. And 2, if that is the new standard because it is the most recent release, etc., had a significantly better box office by 20% globally. A little bit more, in fact, if you just look at the domestic differences between those 2. And so even if it does leg out at the same rate, even a slightly better rate, which is not likely, you're still talking about a significantly smaller box office. So it's not good. That's an excuse people might try to put out there. That does not explain away the massive loss in difference, the massive loss in revenue that the film is still going to see based on the numbers that we have in front of us right now. All right, Master of Gaming says, hi. What's going on, Master of Gaming? Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and early Happy Christmas to you. Master of Gaming saying, which movie would you rather watch if you had to choose, Thunderbolts or The Meg 2? Oh, easily The Meg 2, because at least The Meg 2 it's at least somewhat entertaining. At least it has that. Jenna Wingster says, Odin, come see my new movie, The Housemaid, now in theaters. I look fabulous in it with my good jeans. Oh, goodness. Yeah, I'm not really on my list. Prince Screen that says, has 2005 become the straw that broke the camel's back for box office, especially domestically? I mean, it definitely seems that way, because we've seen a lot of films and a lot of franchises where you've seen a lot of success in the past that have just not shown up, that have just not been able to show up in any significant way. So, I mean, yeah, I wouldn't say it's dunzo, right? But yeah. XVU, thank you for another $5 That's a super chat saying John Williams is doing the music too. Oh, he's coming out of retirement. Is he? That's cool. Again, that is very cool. That is very cool. By the way, I saw that I did miss some comments, so don't worry. I'm scrolling back now because then some super chats distracted me. But yeah, that's cool. He's coming out of retirement. But at the same time, he's up there in years. So that's not enough to sell me on a movie anymore. You need a lot more than that. Banjo Sandwich saying, we're going to need a bigger boat for the Ravens. We'll see. We shall indeed see. Geek Truth 64 at 737. What's going on, Geek Truth? Thank you for being here. Saying Avatar 3 is where I thought it would be at the box office. The second one benefited from a long break between films. Third one didn't have that. Honestly, this third movie felt rehashed and disposable because they all are. Every single one of them is a rehash. Avatar 1 was a complete ripoff of Fern Gully meets Pocahontas meets Dances with the Wolves. That was the commentary at the time, still true today. The second film was just a copy of that same story, just now in water. Now we have another copy of that same story, only now there's some fire people in there too. So yeah, eventually you're going to have it where, okay, you gotta give us a bit more than just the nice visuals on screen. Because I will still say this, even the people who are like, but the visual effects, okay, just because your visual effects are clean, just because your visual effects are groundbreaking, doesn't necessarily mean that they're good. And by that, I mean, and this is an example I've used in the past, you look at the CGI used in Jurassic Park. It's used sparingly, it's used very limitedly, and it's used for very specific purposes. And because of that, it adds to the movie. And because of how well they did it at the time, it still holds up pretty well, even though that was stuff done back in the 90s. Whereas this new stuff, especially with Avatar, when everything is CGI, when everything is artificial, the entire film looks artificial. Yeah, it looks pretty, but it don't look real. It's still not going to get past, and probably never will get past, that uncanny valley effect. And when you choose giant blue Smurf people as your alien race CGI created, I'm sorry, it's never going to be able to look better than what it is. And what it is still unnatural, is still artificial. And so the whole film feels that way. Again, it can look pretty. I'm not saying it's not pretty. I'm not saying that it's not well rendered or anything like that. But what I am saying is that it's a CGI fest. And by CGI fest, I mean it's overdone, it's bloated, and it just takes away from the humanity of what's going on behind the scenes, because there's some real actors giving some good performances there. Let's see. Rats couldn't get StreamYards to work. Oh, no. You mean the Streamlabs link? Oh, no. Is that link broken? I know that they recently got rid of their links hosting platform. But no, it's still up there. Okay, it's still up there. I was wondering. I was like, what in the world? Wouldn't surprise me, though, because Streamlabs has been shutting a lot of things down, so I might have to find an alternative for that one soon, too. Oh, goodness me. Yeah, if anything like that ever happens, let me know. All right, Forever Sci-Fi at 741 said, by 2030, we will have a USS Defiant in a new USS Enterprise. Maybe Star Trek isn't dead yet. Maybe. It probably needs to take a break, though, if it's going to have the best shot. All right, Geek True saying, I know you hate Avatar. However, I still like the first Avatar film. The second and third ones just feel unnecessary. One watch, and I'll probably never watch them again. One watch of the first film was enough for the entire franchise, because if I wanted to see Pocahontas, I would watch Pocahontas. If I wanted to see Dance with the Wolves, I would watch that. If I wanted to see Fern Gully, I'd watch that, because those are better films that did it a lot better. But instead, it's a bloated CGI fest of James Cameron doing James Cameron things, and it's like, I'm sorry, ain't enough. Luke Zilla, what's going on? Jenna Wingster, time to say, my mom asked if I wanted to see Fire and Ash on Christmas. I laughed out loud and then said no. Good for you, Jenna Wingster. 5 points to Jenna Wingster's house, whatever that house might be. Forever Sci-Fi. Still haven't seen a single Avatar film. Good. Don't waste your time. Lady Tharp of Hastings. I don't know why I kept doing that. I have never seen any Avatar films. Good. Don't waste your time. Luke Zilla. To say, even if Avatar 3 ends up at 1.8 billion range, Disney isn't going to let go of it. I expect Avatar 4 is still made, and maybe certain plot points of 5 put into 4 if they end it there. Yeah, I think I heard a rumor. I don't know if it's true or not, so take it with a grain of salt. There was some talk and speculation that apparently James Cameron, and correct me if I'm wrong, James Cameron himself put out there apparently that the film needs to make $2 billion. Like that's like his line. So if it doesn't hit $2 billion, and if that's true, and again, I take that with a grain of salt. Fact check it, please. But if it is true, that for him, $2 billion is the sign or is the line it needs to kind of greenlight the rest of the franchise. Based off of the opening and based off of the historical track record of the Avatar franchise, it's not going to do it. It'll be interesting to see. All right, Prince Screen saying, have you heard the claims that Paramount and Disney are threatening to not allow theaters to have their movies? SpongeBob, Avatar, if theaters show David, theaters near me are showing all three. I mean, by the fact that they are showing it tells me already that that's not true. You hear claims like this happen all the time, and usually it's people who are trying to make excuses. Sad to say. It reminds me back when Captain Marvel was out. I talk about this all the time, right? Everyone was like, well, how in the world did Captain Marvel make $1 billion? Well, it's because Disney kept buying all their tickets. It's like, look, is it true that studios, not just Disney, but studios in general, will sometimes buy tickets to give to groups? That sometimes they'll do giveaways of things like that. Yeah, absolutely. Did they do that to the extent of helping Captain Marvel make well over $1 billion? No, I'm sorry. That's ridiculous. That's absurd. There's no actual evidence of that. It reminds me of those types of claims where it's someone who probably is on like the right side or is more of a conservative minded person, or at the very least more of like an anti-Disney side of things. And they're trying to come up with excuses to why David isn't doing as well as it is, or, you know, they're trying to create some drama around it. I highly doubt that is the case. Disney is a lot more petty than that. Let me just put it that way. Disney is a lot more petty than that, okay? So it's not going to be because Disney doesn't want David playing in the same theater, okay? Disney instead would tell the theaters, oh, you want to have our movie? Okay, guess what? You need to have X amount of showtimes. You need to have X amount of 3D showings, X amount of IMAX showings. And guess what? If you don't provide that, you don't get the movie. If you want to know why there are 3D showings of these films at the times that they are at, it's because Disney demanded it. The theater couldn't get the film unless the theater allowed for those showings to occur. Now, you're lucky if you happen to be in a theater that for some reason is not able to show 3D showings because they don't have the technology for it. It's very rare, I imagine, that would be the case. Most theaters have at least some capacity for 3D technology. But yeah, they force theaters to take on a certain number of showings of 3D, of IMAX, if that's obviously available, and of 2D showings as well. It's also why you'll see a lot of theaters that, for instance, around me, theaters that have not been opening until like 10 or 11 are now opening at like 9. And you might first say, well, they have to because Avatar's 3 hours long, and so the theater, they want more showings. En contraire, it's because Disney, likely in their booking of the theaters, said you need to have X amount of showings in a day, and therefore the only way for the theaters to do that is that they have to open up early. Because I actually was looking into this past Friday. It was like the day before, and I was looking at, okay, let's see the Friday morning IMAX showing. There were like only 3 or 4 seats that were sold for it. So, I mean, could more people showed up after the fact? Again, that's possible. But it's not like they were opening up because there were people just waiting to go to see the movie. It's because they're forced to. If they're going to get the movie, they have to follow certain terms laid out by the studios. And that's not just Disney either. All right, General Wingster, you know what will be remembered well after Avatar? Toxic love. Toxic love. Absolutely. Morning grind. Or no. Slime beneath me. Slime up above. Toxic love. Such a good film. Keely Chow always leaving early. Slander. Oh, come on. Are you the one guy that actually watches Tintin every year? Let's see. Brady saying here, what do you think the second weekend drop-off will be based on the box office data? Could it have a smaller drop-off compared to Way of Water? Thank you very much for asking that. So based off of what we have, the second film, Avatar Way of Water, it had a 53% drop from weekend 1 to weekend 2. Because we had a much lower box office opening this time around, I would not be surprised to see a very similar number, maybe even slightly better. I know that there's going to be some out there who are going to argue, well, because the Saturday to Sunday drop is better, it's like 18% versus 13% between Way of Water's 18 and Fire and Ash's 13%. Seems to be trending in the right direction. The issue, of course, though, is that these movies are, again, they have a very set audience. They have a very set amount of people within their audience. And even when it came to that last film, right, it dropped 53%, and then it went up 6%. Then it dropped 32, 28, 39, 21, 29, 36, 9. This is in February. We're now into February, and it's still in theaters, making $6.5 million in a weekend. This would have been its 10th week out, still making $6.5 million. And then from there, dropping 26, 25, 27, 21, 35. Now we're in week 14 in March. It's still out in theaters. This is Way of Water. Still out in theaters, making $2 million, 21%. And then it had, from there, it was out for about 23 weeks. It didn't leave theaters until the end of May. So it released in December of 2022. It didn't leave theaters until May of 2023. At that point, it was only making $21,000. The last significant weekend it had was at week 15, which is still awesome, right? $1.3 million at 935 screens, okay? So we could and should expect to see similar levels of success. But yeah, that's why the week 2 drop-off is going to be massive. I don't know what it's going to be. I can only go based off of what we've seen previously. That is likely to be around 40 to 50%. 40 to 60 to be more accurate, right? Is the most likely scenario. But anyway. All right, Geek 264. By the way, as I mentioned at the very beginning of the stream, we're going to try to keep this stream only a little bit at just about an hour. So we're just in the last few minutes tonight. And obviously I wanted to talk about the Avatar box office and, of course, promote the Raven Awards. And so, again, if you want a chance to nominate films for the Raven Awards, if you want to nominate the best and worst, this is also for actors as well. Please make sure to fill out the nominations form. This is you nominating in the different categories. There is another option for all the categories if you want to add somebody else or if you want to put nothing, because I have to make every category required. Some people don't like that, but I have to because some people will accidentally submit things before they're actually done with them. And because they submit it before they're done with them, then they can't go back after, because you can't edit these after. You can submit more than one, so there is that. But anyway, just wanted to put that out there before we wrap things up. Okay, Geek264 saying, "Oh man, I love Tintin. Great action adventure movie. The 3D is solid. The motion capture is nowhere near as bad as Polar Express, but I get that some people just don't like that mocap style. It's a very jarring effect, and I would agree, very different and definitely better than what Polar Express's was, but still not good." Hardwick coming in saying, "I think Spielberg's Adventure of Tintin is criminally underrated. The story is good, and most of the character designs were stylized enough to avoid the Uncanny Valley problem." No, they weren't. They very much still have the Uncanny Valley problem because they are still clearly not human beings, man. I got kids. Yes, indeed. General Wingster, don't ever say "I'll be right back" because you won't be back, Odin. I'll be back. I'll be right back. Print screen. To put things in context for Avatar 3's domestic opening weekend, it was similar to How to Train Your Dragon 2025, Conjuring 4, and Captain America. It was less than Superman and Fantastic Four. That's important context. Now, as I say, the caveat to that is the legs on an Avatar movie are not the same as any other film. You can't compare this apples to apples with an MCU movie or with any other IP. All we can do is look at previous Avatar. And again, based on the trends of the previous Avatar films, we saw massive decreases in legs and everything else between 1 and 2. Based on opening weekends between 2 and 3, we're seeing very comparable in some respects, or at the very least, we're still seeing some very sizable drops. All right, Hardwick, what did you think of Zachary Levi out of NT, and especially his interaction with Shad about AI? I loved it. I agreed with essentially everything he had to say, and I'm pretty much right there with him on AI as well. I think AI can be used as a tool, but that when it comes to creativity, especially when it comes to visual stuff, yeah, I am not on Shad's side of that argument. I was very much, you saw me nodding a lot because I'm like, yep, I agree with him a lot, and he was really cool. It's very down to earth, and it was very awesome to have that conversation. Caveat ties, I used to ride a horse that was in Dance with the Wolves. Nice. That's pretty cool. Hardwick, did you watch the trailer for Disclosure Day? I have not seen the trailer yet. It looks interesting. I like that it keeps the story very mysterious. There aren't many UFOs in the trailer. I mean, if anything, we could say, I don't think Spielberg has made too many bad trailers. So it doesn't say much about the film, but Hardwick, I find it interesting that The Housemaid stars Sydney Sweeney and Amanda Seyfried, since I've always thought they look a little alike. That is interesting. Geek64 saying, I still like you, Odin, even though you hate the first Avatar movie. We don't have to agree. No, we don't. It's still not a good movie, but I still love you too, Geek Truth. You can like bad movies. That's okay. Lukezilla, Cameron never said Avatar 3 needs to make $2 billion. He basically said it needs to make a lot of money. I think that's just people twisting words. He'll still be Well, based off of the IMDb reporting, the fourth film is done as far as like the principal photography. It's just going to be in post-production for like 2 years because of all the visual effects and everything. And again, that's going off IMDb. And this was something that I checked like months ago at this point, but I was like, oh, this is kind of crazy that they're filming Avatar 5 and 4 is already done, but they're in post-production. It's just going to take a long time. Master Gaming, which movie would you rather watch if you had to choose? Sorry. I thought you were going to ask the same exact question again, but it's just a slight variation. Thunderbolts or The Flash? I refuse to answer the question. Both of those films are depressing. So I refuse to answer. Neither. Geek2C4. Everyone I know says I'm too critical of movies. I should start showing them Odin. It would make me look lenient. I mean, I literally call myself the critic who is a cynic. Gandalf 1477. Kimberly G saying I have to sign off. I am also right at there as well. Merry Christmas, everyone. Merry Christmas to you. Thank you again for that very generous super chat earlier. I appreciate that. Master of Gaming saying, what do you think of Thunderbolts and Sinners being nominated for most critically acclaimed piece of garbage movies at the Ravens? I think that those are perfectly suited for that. The Last Relic, welcome to the channel. Remember, you have to put a comment or question. If you have a comment or question you want read aloud, put @ in the very big comment. Since you're new here, so I saw that you just subscribed 7 minutes ago. It says, if Hollywood wants theaters to stay open, then the studios should invest by movie theaters. Put their money where their mouths is. I totally agree. And I think they can now start to do that with recent regulations being lifted. Hardwick saying, have you ever watched Chuck? No, but I have it now, and I plan to be watching it soon, actually. Good old Sonar. Geek64 saying, I like the disaster movie 2012, love watching it, and I know how bad it is. Again, all of us have those guilty pleasures. Nothing wrong with that. Forever Sci-Fi, Merry Christmas and Happy New Year's to all, to you as well. Geek64, Merry Christmas all, Merry Christmas to you as well. Lukezilla saying, they only filmed 30% of Avatar 4. First act takes place in the current timeline. Then there is an 8-year time jump. Good grief, this is going to be terrible. That they have to film with the actors being much older now. Gotcha. That just makes me hate it that much more, though. Because why? It's like, oh, because they got it. It's like, it doesn't matter. If you care that much about your actors being connected to the age that they are on screen, why don't you spend that much time working on your story writing if you care that much? Avatar 4, Gargamel's Revenge, essentially, is what we have going on. Yeah. Very good, everybody. So, as I said, I do have to wrap things up early tonight. We have some things to take care of before family gets into town and everything like that. So thank you all very much for watching tonight. This will be our last stream before Christmas time, but don't worry, we will have a stream next week on the 29th. So we'll have one more stream before the new year. And I'll try and see if I can come up with, at the very least, like a most anticipated list. In fact, I'll write it down because I tend to forget these things. So most anticipated list next stream. There we go. So I'll try and get all that together. But again, thank you all very much. This has been an awesome show, an awesome year. We still got one more to go. Xboot, thank you very much for the very center super chat earlier. And again, for the few super chats, always so very generous you are, man. And then, of course, Gandalf 1477, Kimberly G, Killing Shadow Cat. Thank you, as always, Kimberly G, for your support, for always being here, and for that very generous super chat earlier as well. Anyway, that's going to be it for me, everybody. So we talked, of course, about Avatar, the facts of the situation. It's trending a lot worse than what the last film did. And right now, what we're seeing, 3 films now of data, is the audience is losing interest. We have 20% drop from number 2 to number 3. We don't know what we don't know what the second weekend drop off is going to be yet. Probably going to be in the 50% range, maybe a little bit less, maybe a little bit more. meaning like between 40 and 60%. And that's going to tell us quite a bit. If we see a significantly stronger hold, maybe we're able to actually see the film make up lost ground. And if that happens, well, then that changes the discussion quite a bit. But all we have in front of us is the data. All we have in front of us is what has been reported. What has been reported is not a good sign for the longevity of this franchise. As of right now, this film will make money. It will make profit. It will break even. But it likely won't make it to it most likely will not make it to $2 billion. We're looking at 1.5 to 1.8 billion. And also, tonight we talked about officially the Raven Awards. That's right. Our nominations are being accepted as of right now. I've posted the link a few times. You can find the link posted in the community tab here on YouTube. So go to the community tab on my channel. You'll see the link there. There's a code 1566. So then that way you can enter in your nominations. You do have to fill out the whole form for it to count, and it does not save your progress. So only open it if you are ready to go through the categories and to put your nominees in. There's an other option, which if you don't like the ones listed, that's the short list. That was stuff collected from earlier in the year. You can nominate your own movie, or you could also put skip or whatever it is that you want to put in there. I do recommend that people put something at the very least, though. And anyway, covered everything I was going to cover. Thank you all very much for watching. You guys are all amazing and beautiful people. Have a wonderful rest of your day. And because we are, again, just a couple days away from Christmas, I hope everyone has a wonderful, a blessed, and a very merry, happy Christmas. And that we remember the reason for the season, which is to remember and commemorate not only the birth of Christ, but also to prepare ourselves for his second arrival. And we, of course, here on the channel, pray for all of you. We ask you to pray for us. And thank you all again for all of your love and support for this year, especially during this time of year where it can be, very busy for a lot of people. So I love you guys. Have a wonderful rest of your evening, a blessed Christmas. And as always, God bless. And now let me give a shout out to all of my Chosen of Valhalla members, starting off first with my Patreon members, Father Luca Illick, hail to you, Father, and also to Miss Mountain Muses. Check out her YouTube channel by the same name, Miss Mountain Muses. She is very lovely, great, awesome Catholic faith-based content over there. You'll also find over on Subscribestar my member Matt317. He is on Twitch with the same channel name, Matt317. Shout out to you, good sir. And also to a longtime member here, Mr. Roy, my Chosen of Valhalla member here on YouTube. Mr. Roy, thank you for always hanging out and for always being a part of this channel. It does mean a lot, as well as it does for all of my Chosen of Valhalla members. And if you want your name shouted out at the end of every live stream or video, or if you want it listed in that list that was playing just before, just now, check out the top link in the video description below. You'll find out how to get those types of shout outs at the end of every live stream and video. Not to mention, you get access to bonus video content and also access to a Discord server where there are a couple of channels on there where I do giveaways every single month. In fact, I do multiple giveaways every single month. I try to make it so that I'm giving away Blu-rays and 4Ks that make up at least 4 or 5 different giveaways. Sometimes I have to put them in all towards the very end because back in the school session, of course, now means that I'm going to be a little bit more delayed there. So if you want access to things like that, if you want access to a great community, you guys seriously are all amazing and beautiful. Have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, God bless.